Welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and today we're taking a look at the Sardakk N'orr. This is a faction from the base game of Twilight Imperium 4th edition, and upgraded by the Prophecy of Kings expansion, and we'll talk about that holistically. This will be both a component overview of everything they have, as well as an analysis at the end of the video. I love making these videos for you guys. To support me for free, go ahead and hit the subscribe button right below. We just passed 1,000 subscribers and we're really growing this community together. I love this and I comment on every single comment, so go ahead and leave that below as well. The best way to support me, however, is right on the Patreon. Alongside getting a discount to merch just like this, you can also get a plethora of digital and physical benefits, including early access to videos just like these. Without further ado though, let's go ahead and head out and talk about the Sardakk N'orr. Here we have the Sardakk N'orr's faction sheet. In the Sardakk system lives the insectile primitive race of the N'orr. These creatures live on two separate planets, both isolated and desolate, disconnected from the Council. More intelligent members do travel out to the center of the galaxy to participate in Council-wide votes, but the majority of the 28 billion creatures that live on these two planets are part of a massive army planning to take control of the galaxy by primitive force. These creatures pray to the Broodmother, but are truly controlled by the Teklar Legion, an elite military force within the N'orr society. They are planning to use their exotriremes to spread across the galaxy, distributing themselves amongst every planet they come about. So, where do they begin? They start on a 2-planet home system. The first planet is Kinara, a 3-resource and 1-influence planet. And the second planet is Trenlock, a 1-resource and 0-influence planet. So 4-1 in total. This really isn't quite great of a start, and I don't think they're going to be going many places using these two, especially not on their own. They have quite the decent starting fleet in terms of ground forces, beginning with 2 carriers, 1 cruiser, 5 infantry, a space dock, and a PDS. This is alright because we have at least 2 carriers and 4 infantry, the 5 being a little bonus. The PDS is nice to have on the home system, but just starting off with that single cruiser without a dreadnought is a little bit difficult for them. But we'll discuss a little bit of how to buff them up in just a bit. They also, of course, have starting technology, which they begin the game with. This is... Oh, wait. Oh, they don't. Oh. They're the only race to not start with technology? Oh boy. Alright, I'll have a lot to discuss in the analysis portion. So this is your beginning. I guess they probably make it up with quite a few faction abilities then. We can start with... Oh, there's only 1. Oh, okay. Well, it's got to be at least powerful and complicated, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at Unrelenting. This says, apply +1 to the result of each of your unit's combat rolls. A +1? Okay. I'm making it seem like these guys are terrible, but they've got to have more going for them, right? Right? Either way, you can play this faction just fine. We'll go ahead and cover the rest of their abilities right now, and I'll show you how they got that much better in the Prophecy of Kings expansion. But they also, of course, always had the flagship. This was an 8-cost, 6x2 combat, 1 movement, and 3 capacity flagship with sustained damage. And it also had the ability, add +1 to the result of each of your other ship's combat rolls in the system. This is not too bad of a flagship, though it might be a little bit overcosted for what you get. Combat 6x2 is pretty nice, and being able to bring around 3 capacity is sort of your minimum amount to make it decent. That bonus to the other ships in your system can really add up though, and we'll discuss in a bit. The expansion also added a mech to them. This is Valkyrie Exoskeleton. This is a 2-cost and 6 combat value with sustained damage mech. Fairly standard, but it also has the ability, after this unit uses its sustained damage ability during ground combat, it produces 1 hit against your opponent's ground forces on this planet. A really nice little defensive ability, and allows them to really buff up their little bits of ground combat that they participate in. They also have faction-specific technologies. In order to understand that, we have to understand their exotriremes, the N'orr dreadnoughts. This is a 4-cost, 5 combat value, movement of 1, and capacity of 1 dreadnought with sustained damage and bombardment 4x2. This is already a little bit of an upgrade to the Dreadnought, and although it might not be quite as good as maybe the Barony of Letnev's, it is pretty nice to have. But you can of course upgrade it using a yellow and 2 blue technologies into the Exotrireme 2. This keeps its 4 cost, 5 combat, and capacity of 1, but moves up to movement of 2. Its sustained damage and bombardment abilities are both the same as well, but it gets a very interesting ability. This unit cannot be destroyed by direct hit action cards like always, but also, after a round of space combat, you may destroy this unit to destroy up to 2 ships in this system. This is a little bit of a mini yin ability, and the fact that it's destroy and not damage is also quite important. Their second technology is Valkyrie Particle Weave, a 2 red technology. It's kind of strange that we've got something that starts with no tech and needs a yellow, 2 blues, and 2 reds to get all of what they need. Well, we'll discuss in a minute. This says, after making combat rolls during a round of ground combat, if your opponent produced 1 or more hits, you produce 1 additional hit. A little bit of a nice buff, and I don't think this really hurts them at all, but you won't see it come up too often. The leaders really are the nice buff in the expansion. Starting off with their agent, we have Tarot. It begins the game unlocked, and at the end of a player's tactical action, you may exhaust this card. If you do, that player may place 2 infantry from their reinforcements on a planet they control in the active system. So they had to have taken the planet, but they do get a little bit of a buff and be able to lock down a planet when they first arrive, populating themselves more. Moving into their commander. This is unlocked by having 5 planets in non-home systems. His name is Gom Sekis. When you do unlock him, you get the passive ability. During the Commit Ground Forces step, you can commit up to 1 ground force from each planet in the active system and each planet in adjacent systems that do not contain one of your command tokens. So this ability, in essence, allows you to move infantry and mechs from planets on adjacent systems without having to actually move them using ships. This is really helpful with how many infantry they start with and how many they can make with throw. And finally, they have the hero. This is Cheval Harbinger. It's unlocked by having 3 scored objectives like most, and it gives you the ability Teklar Conditioning. After you move ships into the active system, you may skip directly to the Commit Ground Forces step. If you do, after you commit ground forces to land on a planet, purge this card and return each of your ships in the active system to your reinforcements. This is quite a mouthful and quite an interesting ability indeed. Teklar Conditioning pretty much allows you to skip right past space combat, move directly into committing ground forces, and take planets without actually having to fight them in the air. It's interesting and really situational. I guess we'll talk about those situations in a minute. Finally, though, we have Teklar Legion. This is the promissory note that you would give away to somebody else. It says, at the start of ground combat, apply +1 to the result of each of your unit's combat rolls during this combat. If your opponent is the N'orr player, apply -1 to the result of each of his unit's combat rolls during this combat. Then return this card to the N'orr player. This is a little bit of an interesting promissory note because it does benefit them even if you're not the enemy, but even more if you are the enemy. I wouldn't give that out too often. So that's it. That's it. Usually at this point, I'm excited to talk to you about the analysis, but I think I've got to do a little bit of damage repair instead. Let's go ahead and head on out. Okay, so I called it damage repair, damage control. I don't know about the Sardakk N'orr, but let me go ahead and discuss him anyway. So a little bit of a story to start off with that I believe a lot of you can relate to. And if you haven't played the game yet, go ahead and learn how to play right in the guide up here, and then come back, because I promise you might make this same mistake. I was playing with a group of friends for one of our first Twilight Imperium games. One of us picked the Federation of Sol because it was simple humans. One of us picked the Clan of Sar because they were funny looking. One of us picked the Nalu Collective because of reasons. And one of us picked the Sardakk N'orr. Now, that friend, and I know you're watching this, I am so sorry I let you do that. The Sardakk N'orr just simply is not for new players. And it's so funny because this is the faction that when you look at the sheet, looks like it is for the newest of the newest of the new players. Their unrelenting ability is so simple. Apply +1 to the result of all your units' combat rolls, and it even gives you a little +1 under all of the bits of the sheet to remind you that that's the case. Not only that, but your flagship, when you do end up making it, even though it costs the full 8, is going to give you another +1 to every other ship in that system. On top of that, they have that upgraded Dreadnought, which you can upgrade even more, and they also have the ability to produce additional hits with their Valkyrie Particle Weave. All seems pretty simple, until you realize that the hit on technology in the very beginning of the game is the worst part about them, and it's really bad. Now, Prophecy of Kings made this a little bit easier, because not only is there exploration to be able to gain trade goods or commodities or whatever, but also if you do explore a lot, which I suggest you do with them, then you'll be able to get relics, and some of the relics allow you to get technologies for free. Pray for them. They can't waste their time going for unnecessary things like big ships, lots of command counters, whatever, those necessary things in the game, because they need to fix themselves first before they can move on. Now, I understand this is scaring you away from the Sardakk N'orr, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Because if you're playing Twilight Imperium a lot and you're an intermediate or advanced player, then you should be looking for a challenge. And quite honestly, I think in a couple of games, I might choose the Sardakk N'orr myself. So essentially, you need a very similar goal in mind to Barony of Letnev, with large ships that do a lot of damage in very specific scenarios to take objectives. I normally don't talk about a specific tech path with all of the factions that I do for these guides, but the Sardakk N'orr are hurting so much I need to show you how to fix them. I would start, surprisingly, with Scanlink Drone Network. This is a new ability that allows you to re-explore planets when you activate them. Now, the Sardakk N'orr won't be able to explore that much because they won't have too good of a command counter economy, even though they begin with 2C, 4I, 2 carriers, 4 infantry. This is fixed a little bit by the Scanlink Drone Network. And remember when I was talking to you about the importance of exploration and relics? Well, this is going to make that so much easier. Personally then, if I were you, I would then move into Gravity Drive after getting Dark Energy Tap. Move into those empty systems. I don't think you should really waste your time moving through asteroid fields with anti-mass deflectors, so Dark Energy Tap is going to let you explore that much more and get you a more RNG-based benefit, which you really are going to need as the Sardakk N'orr. Moving into Gravity Drive then allows you to set yourself up to take a specific planet that you need, especially later on when you unlock that hero. The hero is interesting and kind of bad because they can just take the planet back. Now, you're essentially killing everything that you put on that planet, so if you need it for an objective later on in the round, take it, because you are going to be able to score that objective, sure, but then they can just move back in and destroy your units, and you have no way to escape. This is obviously supposed to be on purpose, as this is a suicidal run into a planet to kill all of your units in order to benefit the entire tribe, or hive, or whatever they call it. So their hero is not the flashiest hero, nor is it the most powerful. But if you just took that technology path, then now you've got a yellow and 2 blue technologies, and you can move into that exotrireme. The exotrireme is pretty good, but you're going to need to know how to use it. Remember that you only get +1 on combat rolls. This doesn't consider itself into unit abilities like bombardment on the exotrireme, which is another reason why I think it's a waste of time to go into PDS2, even though you should want to protect your home system. I would say use your agent to protect your home system more like. So let's pretend that you've got Scanlink Drone Network, the 2 blues, and exotrireme. You can be moving that around, positioning yourself for your hero usage later in the game, exploring planets and deep space as you go. Now, what about that commander? Now remember, you can move infantry without actually having to move them in your ships. This allows you some intelligent gameplay with Scanlink Drone Network, and because you should be taking technology as much as you possibly can in the early games, or at least using all of your resources in order to use its secondary, then you won't actually have that many command counters or resources left over to build ships. So thankfully, they have this commander. They can re-explore those planets without actually having to build anything on them. And you do get +1 to the combat rolls, so people won't be wanting to pick fights all the time. Although +1 really isn't as good as you might think, because they only have the base 8 combat value infantry, and their mechs aren't even much better at 6. I would think that they would at least have gotten a little bit of a boost to their infantry or mechs, more than just more of them. And they don't even start with that many resources on the planets. I'm sorry, can you tell they're not my favorite? The Sardakk N'orr are just kind of simple in the worst way. I love the Bug Boys in terms of lore. I love the Bug Boys in terms of challenging myself. But if I'm going to wait 6 months to play Twilight Imperium, I'm not going to pick Sardakk N'orr. I'm going to pick someone that's going to make me feel powerful. If I'm playing all the time on Tabletop Simulator, then that's definitely a situation in which I would pick the Sardakk N'orr. So now that all that's been said, let's talk about what the Sardakk are really doing. They're planet hopping. This is the one interesting thing about the Sardakk that I think really makes them shine outside of all the other factions. Yes, they have their difficulties, but remember that they can completely take over the board without actually having to commit ships to systems all the time. Yes, it's nice to have your exo-triremes, especially upgraded ones, but if you do have that Scanlink drone network even, then they're able to re-explore planets as well as take planets consistently, utilizing the combination of both their Commit Ground Forces commander and their Skip to Commit Ground Forces hero. They do have some redeeming values, remember, but let's keep talking about why they may be a little bit more difficult for newer players as well. If that interest hooks you, however, it might still be worth a try. So I guess I'll talk about their promissory note here before I talk about the strategy cards, and then we'll go ahead and finish it off. The promissory note is definitely one that you can give away across the table, but don't give it away to somebody right next to you, because ultimately you will make enemies with them trying to get your objectives, and they will use it back against you. This turns you into them and them into you, and is really detrimental towards your entire idea of taking planets and holding them. Make a friend across the table. In fact, make 2 or 3. With the Sardakk N'orr, you're going to need it. They have 3 commodities, which is kind of interesting. I would have thought they had 2, but I guess they're a hive-based race with a lot of natural resources, so that makes sense. With those 2 friendlies across the table, you might actually be able to build yourself up a little bit, get some trade goods, and build some exo-triremes and other ships to move yourself around. The 2 carriers are pretty nice to start with, but you're definitely going to need more. Essentially, you're going to be wanting to take technology as many times as you can early game. If you don't have technology, then I would suggest politics or leadership. Leadership because command counters are always going to be necessary for them in order to utilize their commander. And politics because that's the way you get technology the next round. Just hope somebody doesn't have a really nasty action card. Trade, of course, could be helpful as a 4th option, but you might have to really barter with people around the table and even give them free things in order to allow you to use that technology card that you need so badly. I really don't have quite a lot more to talk about with the Sardakk N'orr in terms of a faction guide. I think it's more about your ability to play Twilight Imperium almost without very many abilities. This is a very vanilla faction, which kind of feels good to an experienced player. They don't have much to think about and they can just play the game with a little bit of buff to their combat values. But as a new player, you definitely don't want to choose them coming in thinking they're going to be simple and easy to win with. They are not. Do you disagree with me? Do you think the Sardakk N'orr is the be-all, end-all, amazing faction? What do you think that I got wrong, or do you think I'm harping on them way, way too much? The Sardakk N'orr, I love them. I love that they're in the game. I love their lore and everything, don't get me wrong, but they're just not my type. If you have any comments or criticism, or even want to tell me that I suck, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I respond to everybody. I'm just kidding. Nobody does that. Without further ado, have a great rest of your day. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.